On a humid April night in 1962, the Apollo Theater in Harlem pulsed with an energy that threatened to tear through its very walls. The crowd had been screaming for 3 hours straight, their voices hoarse, their bodies drenched in sweat, but nobody was thinking about leaving. They were waiting for something they had never seen before, something that would become legend. Behind the crimson curtain, a 29-year-old man named James Brown stood in complete silence, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the sequin cape draped across his shoulders. The weight of the fabric felt heavier than usual that night, as if it carried the burden of everything he had survived to reach this moment. What the 10,000 people packed into that theater didn't know was that the performance they were about to witness wasn't just entertainment, it was the physical manifestation of a wound that had never healed, a theatrical ritual born from the moment a 4-year-old boy watched his mother walk away and never return. But what the crowd didn't know was that James's greatest performance wasn't on any stage. It would happen 18 months later, on a street corner most people walked past without looking. Barnwell, South Carolina, 1937. A 4-year-old boy stood at the door, waiting. His mother never came back. She had kissed his forehead that morning, her lips cold, her eyes already somewhere else, and walked toward the road carrying a single cloth bag. The boy waited at that splintered door until the sun went down, convinced she would return. She never did. And somewhere in his 4-year-old mind, a truth crystallized: he had not been enough to make her stay. James Brown grew up in that shotgun shack with relatives who fed him when they could, picking cotton until his fingers bled, shining shoes on corners where men would spit at his feet. He learned to dance for pennies because if he moved fast enough, desperately enough, people would stop seeing a poor child and start seeing magic. Every performance, every scream, every collapse on stage, it was all searching for that moment when someone would choose to stay. If you remember 1962, you remember the Apollo. You remember the feeling of seeing James Brown live, the way he transformed suffering into electricity. By April, he had clawed from Barnwell poverty to national fame, formed the famous Flames, and mastered the art of collapsing on stage only to be revived by a cape-wearing assistant. The crowd thought it was showmanship. They didn't understand it was therapy. Every collapse was his mother leaving. Every resurrection was proof he could survive it. According to Apollo Theater archives, the night of April 24, 1962, holds the highest recorded audience energy levels in the venue's 50-year history. Security logs note, crowd refused to leave for 45 minutes post-performance. The cape routine was never about performance. 1 year later, on a Harlem street corner, James would make a decision that terrified everyone around him. October 1963, Harlem. James Brown sat in the back of a black Cadillac, exhausted from a 4 a.m. recording session. James had walked past 1,000 street corners. So why did he stop that day? The car paused at a red light on 125th Street, and James glanced out the window. Then he saw him, a man sitting against a brick wall, legs extended, wearing a coat so worn it was barely fabric. His hands rested palms up in his lap, not begging but not refusing, just open, as if he'd stopped expecting anything to fill them. James saw something in Robert's eyes he'd been running from for 30 years, the vacancy of someone who had stopped believing in return. These were his mother's eyes from that morning in Barnwell. The light turned green. "Stop the car," James said. He stepped onto the sidewalk and approached slowly. "Hello, brother. What's your name?" The man looked up, eyes focusing. "Robert. Robert Williams." James crouched down, expensive suit touching dirty concrete. "I'm James. You look like you could use a meal." Robert's hand trembled as he reached out. But James didn't walk away. Maybe you've been where James was: success on the outside, emptiness within, searching every stranger's face for proof someone would choose to stay. The man on the corner had a story Harlem knew by heart: jazz pianist, alcohol, loss. Robert Williams had played with Charlie Parker's Orbit in the 1940s, his hands moving across piano keys like water. A 1947 critic wrote that Robert played like he was conversing with God, and God was listening. But God stopped listening around 1955 when his wife Margaret died giving birth to their third child. Robert tried to keep playing, but grief has a weight even the strongest hands can't support. The bottle became everything. 3 children given to foster care. I became what my mother did to me, Robert whispered years later. Perhaps you knew someone like Robert. Harlem had thousands. Every city did. He spent 4 years on streets, learning to become invisible. Robert's story was the kind Harlem knew too well, but what happened next wasn't. James took Robert to a diner and ordered eggs, toast, bacon, juice, coffee. Robert's hands shook so badly James cut the food into smaller pieces. They sat for 3 hours. Robert told his story in fragments. James listened without interrupting. When Robert finished, James said something that made everyone question his sanity. "Come work with me." At the studio. Robert looked at him incredulously. "Mr. Brown, I can't even hold a microphone steady." James's response was immediate, "Then we'll start with holding things." What Robert confessed that night would shatter everything James thought he knew. Perhaps you knew someone like Robert. Harlem had thousands. Every city did. The JBs reacted predictably. Maceo Parker asked, "Boss, what are you doing? This man needs a hospital, not a recording studio." The JBs asked, "Why are you risking everything for a stranger?" James looked at his band. "Hospitals discharge people. I need him to have somewhere to go after." They exchanged looks that said James had lost it. But they didn't quit. Robert arrived at 6 a.m. every morning, and every morning was war. Robert arrived 2 hours late, hands shaking, unable to hold a microphone. His hands trembled so violently he dropped equipment. Detox in a recording studio. Night sweats. The JBs watching in disbelief. James gave him small tasks, holding cables, organizing music. Week 1, Robert arrived drunk. Week 2, he disappeared. Week 3, his hands shook less. Week 4, he held a microphone for 3 hours without dropping it. Have you ever seen someone and recognized your own pain in their eyes? Week 5 felt like hope. Week 6, Robert vanished. 3 days. No word. Week 6 arrived. The studio was empty. And James made a choice that would define his legacy. He walked out mid-session to search Harlem bars. He found Robert in a basement bar off St. Nicholas Avenue. For 4 years, Robert lived invisible. Until James Brown saw him. Robert sat with 3 empty glasses, head in hands. James sat beside him. 2 men running from the same ghost. Finally Robert spoke. "I can't do it, Mr. Brown. Every day I wake up and I'm still the man who lost his children." The shaking stops, but that never stops. When Robert disappeared again, James finally broke. In that Harlem bar, James finally broke. Close your eyes. Remember a time when someone's scream for help sounded like your own. The moment James found Robert in that Harlem bar, he made a confession that terrified them both. James turned to face him. "My mother left when I was 4 years old. She walked away and I stood at the door waiting. I'm 30 years old and I'm still standing at that door, Robert." In that Harlem bar, when Robert was broken and drunk, James screamed, "My mother left too. But you have a choice. Every time I collapse on stage and someone puts a cape on me, I'm trying to create the moment someone comes back. But it's not real. This is real. Me choosing to show up for you." Robert wept, James wept. Then James said the words that changed everything. "Come back tomorrow. 6 a.m. If you don't show, I'll find you again. And the day after. Because somebody should have done that for me." And then Robert spoke the words that changed everything, "I'll be there." Robert showed up at 5:45 a.m. For 8 more weeks, he showed up every day. By week 10, Robert could hold a microphone for entire sessions. By week 12, he hummed harmonies, voice cracked but musical. By week 14, James asked him to sing. Robert's voice cracked so badly the engineer stopped the tape. But James kept recording until the crack became part of the music. Soul music historian Dr. Emily Lordy noted in her 2018 biography, The Meaning of Soul, James Brown's rescue missions weren't charity, they were therapeutic rituals, attempts to rewrite his mother's abandonment through each person he lifted. And then, in that tiny Harlem club, something ancient awakened. Spring 1964. A tiny club. 100 people. James called Robert to the stage. Spring arrived with New York intensity. James Brown walked into a tiny Harlem club holding maybe 100 people. The club owner looked at him incredulously. James smiled. "Tonight, this place is exactly where I need to be." The stage was barely 6 inches high, with a flickering spotlight. James took the microphone. "Tonight I want you to meet Robert Williams. Some might remember him from when this city believed in jazz. He's going to sing with me. Listen with everything you've got, because you're about to hear a man coming back from the dead." When the first note cracked in that club, 100 people stopped breathing. Robert walked onto that stage like climbing a mountain. The song was "Try Me," James's first hit. But Robert's voice cracked on the first note. James started singing, then nodded to Robert. The first note cracked, fractured, broken. But James didn't stop. The first note cracked. The crowd held its breath. If you've ever felt invisible in a crowd, you know what Robert felt that night, being seen not despite your brokenness but because of it. Second verse, Robert's voice was stronger. Still cracked, but undeniably present. The audience leaned forward, recognizing their own failures in that broken voice. The song built, Robert finding harmonies he didn't know he remembered, James lifting him, refusing to let him fall. The reason James stopped the music wasn't about Robert, it was about the boy still waiting at that door. Final verse, "Will you try one more time, will you believe comeback is possible?" Robert sang with eyes closed, hands steady, voice cracked but soaring. On the last note, his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees. James was across that stage in 2 seconds. 2 men embraced, and 100 people wept. My mother left and I kept waiting. But you stayed. You came back. You proved return is possible. Our generation understood something today's world forgets: healing takes time, not algorithms. The standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. The club owner said, "This city will never forget tonight." People left transformed. Marcus would say years later, "That night, we saw theater become truth. 2 broken men prove broken things can save each other." Robert toured with James, singing backup. He wasn't perfect. Some nights his hands shook. But James was there every day. Robert's first paycheck, he called his children. They hung up. The oldest didn't let him finish. The middle child listened 30 seconds. The youngest wouldn't come to the phone. 2 years of letters. Returned unopened. James told him, "Forgiveness is earned, not given." Maybe you've written letters that went unanswered. Robert wrote every week. Short letters acknowledging he had no right to expect forgiveness. Letters came back unopened. But he kept writing. James made sure he had stamps, kept him on tour, kept him choosing to show up. When James Brown's estate was settled in 2021 after 15 years of legal battles, documents revealed a handwritten list, 50 lives. Robert's name was first, dated October 1963. Next to it, "The one who taught me forgiveness." Spring 1967, Robert's phone rang. His youngest daughter, 21. 1967, the youngest daughter finally responded, "I haven't forgiven you. But I'll listen. I got your letters. I haven't forgiven you. But I'll listen." The phone call Robert received in 1967 would reveal why James never gave up. The day Robert's daughter finally answered the phone, she said, "I didn't think you were real anymore." 17 minutes. Robert cried most of it. The reunion wasn't Hollywood. It was painful, slow, real. But it was a beginning. By 1970, Robert had relationships with all 3 children. Not perfect, but real. Saving Robert wasn't charity. It was James trying to rewrite his own abandonment. 2006, 1 month before James Brown died, a visitor arrived. We all remember where we were when we heard James Brown died. James lay in an Atlanta hospital room, breathing labored. Robert Williams, 76, hands steady, walked in. "You gave me a family," Robert whispered, steady hands holding James's trembling ones. Robert, now 76, had grandchildren. 3 grandchildren. "They call me Papa." Think about your own 1963. Who saw you when you felt invisible? What James said in his final hospital bed would explain that 1963 street corner forever. James's final words: "My mother left and broke me. You stayed and saved me. Every person I helped after you, dozens, Robert, everyone was possible because you proved saving someone could save me too." The estate documents revealed 50 names. Attorneys were baffled. It's not a will. It's testimony. It's proof. James Brown's final performance, ultimate proof. The boy at the door became the man who showed up. Robert died in 2019, at 89, surrounded by family. At his funeral, his youngest daughter said, "My father disappeared. Then James Brown disappeared him back into existence." Dad spent his life doing for others what James did, showing up, staying, refusing to let people vanish. That street corner didn't just save 2 men. It created a philosophy: the worst thing that happened to you can become what makes you capable of saving someone else. James wasn't a god. He was a 29-year-old man still waiting for his mother to come back. The Cape routine was rehearsal for real work happening on street corners, in bars, in phone booths where broken men called children who sometimes chose to listen. If this story moved you, if you remember the Apollo, if someone once saved you, share this. Because somewhere right now, there's a Robert on a corner, invisible, waiting. And somewhere there's a James wondering if stopping might finally rewrite the story, breaking them both. 1 street corner. 2 lifetimes. Forever changed. Drive past, or stop. Be the person who left, or who stays. James made his choice October 1963. Robert made his every day after. They proved the hardest working man isn't measured by performances, but by daily decisions to show up when nobody else will, to prove return is possible because somewhere, a 4-year-old boy is still at a door, and he deserves to know someone will choose to come back. Metnin Sununa 500 Kelamelik CTA Ekliorum. If this story touched something deep inside you, you're not alone. Thousands of people have watched this channel discover these forgotten moments in music history, the stories that never made it to the history books, the street corners that changed everything, the quiet acts of courage that define entire legacies. James Brown's story with Robert wasn't unique. It was one of 50. 50 people whose names appeared on that handwritten list found in 2021. Each name represents a life saved, a door that opened, a choice to stay when leaving was easier. Here's what we want to know from you: who was your James Brown? Who stopped their car on your corner when you were invisible? Maybe it was a teacher who saw potential when everyone else saw problems. Maybe it was a neighbor who knocked on your door when you'd given up answering. Maybe it was a stranger in a diner who bought you a meal and listened without judging. Or maybe you were someone's James Brown. Maybe you made the terrifying choice to show up for someone when it would have been easier to drive past. We want to hear those stories. Drop them in the comments below. This community is built on the truth that broken people can save each other. And if you're sitting there thinking nobody ever stopped for me, listen carefully. You're here. You watched this entire story. That means something in you recognized the boy at the door, the man on the corner, the trembling hands. You're not as invisible as you think. The fact that this story made you feel something means you're still capable of healing, which means you're still capable of becoming someone's reason to believe return is possible. Hit that subscribe button if you believe these stories matter. We're not here to give you feel-good content you forget in 5 minutes. We're here to remind you that the most powerful force in human history isn't talent or wealth or fame, it's the choice to show up for someone when nobody else will. Every week, we're bringing you stories like this. Real people. Real choices. Real proof that comeback is possible. Turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Leave a comment. Any comment. Tell us whose story you want to hear next. Tell us about the person who saved you. Tell us you're the one sitting on the corner right now, wondering if anyone will stop. This community shows up for each other. Read through the comments on our videos. You'll find people sharing resources, people offering to listen, people admitting they're struggling, and others responding, "Me too, let's survive this together." And hit that like button, not for the algorithm, but as a vote. A vote that says these stories deserve to be told, that the Robert Williams of the world deserve to be remembered, that the 4-year-old boys waiting at doors deserve to know their story doesn't end with abandonment. Every like tells the platform to show this to one more person who might be convinced nobody's coming. 1 street corner. 2 lifetimes. Forever changed. Now it's your turn. Who will you stop for?